The next step you want to do is to apply your gesso to the jar. Again, gesso is usually just a primer. It comes in clear or white. For this, I'm going to use 2 coats, so I will apply the first coat, let it completely dry, and then add my second coat. Here I already applied my first coat, and as you can see, it dried to almost a frost finish. And now I am applying the second coat, which I will allow to completely dry before continuing. And here I am applying the primer. Just like the gesso, you are going to apply 2 coats of this, but make sure you apply in thin layers and allow to dry in between completely before applying the next layer. After you let that completely dry, then you're going to take some white and blue paint and mix it together. You only want a few dabs of blue and mix it with the white until it forms almost a baby blue shade. When you apply, you want to make sure that you apply it to 1/3 of the jar, and if you have little pieces of white or strips of prominent white onto the painting, that's perfectly fine. It will act as clouds. For this next step, you're going to want to take your blue paint and add it to the white. You want your blue to be a little bit darker, and you also want to apply it just to the middle sections of the jar. You want to try to leave most of the sky, the baby blue, and then on the bottom as white as possible for our next step in the process. Alright, for this part here, you're going to want to take your white again, and then your small brush. It could be a round brush or a square brush, it doesn't really matter, just a very small one. And you're going to want to take it and go in a dabbing motion in between the sand and the ocean. This is going to have the effect as if the ocean were coming up to shore and smashing into the sand. For this technique, you can also use a Q-tip as well, and that looks really, really nice. You don't want to put too much white on the brush though, because then it will give it a heavy appearance. You just want to stipple it very nicely. So after you let that dry, the next step is for details in the ocean. As you can tell on the jar, when I applied the dark paint to it, there are still some white spots on that. I did that intentionally to show some contrast. If you don't have any white spots that are showing through on the ocean, you can always go ahead and use some white to add in some lines into the ocean to show the movement. But for right now, I'm taking the blue, just plain blue, and putting in some added lines in there just to show depth. What you're also going to want to do at this point too is you're going to want to take some blue and do a fine line between the sky and the ocean. The dark line that's separating the sky and the ocean is going to serve as your horizon line. So therefore, it is important that you try to get the line as even across as possible. It's okay if the bottom is kind of wavy, where you see that the white is kind of going up and down through the sand and the water, because that's what naturally happens anyways. But when you look out into the ocean and you look into the horizon, typically it's pretty straight, flat across, and that's how you're going to show the distance as well. Now here comes the fun part. So in the plate, I had already added in some Mod Podge. It's a pretty decent amount of Mod Podge, and I use the dishwasher safe kind. You can get it at Michael's or Hobby Lobby. And I am sprinkling some glitter onto the top, which I will then use my paintbrush to stir it in. And I will then be applying that to just the middle section where the ocean is. I like using Mod Podge because you're easily able to spread the glitter without it being too much. Originally, I was going to just put some Mod Podge on the top and then sprinkle the glitter on top of that. However, I feel that by incorporating it into the Mod Podge first, it allows me to spread it evenly while also having control of the glitter. Whereas if I were to just pour it on top, it might get into the sand, it might get into the sky, where I just want it to be in the ocean as if the sun were shining, and it gives it a cool little effect. Just like you did with your primer or your gesso, you're going to want to apply the Mod Podge in thin layers. The only difference between Mod Podge and the gesso is that you're going to want to wait 2 hours in between each coat. But you want to have 2 full coats in order to make sure that it's sealed properly.